Cleveland sleeps in peace each night, yet beneath its calm skyline, silence hides the screams that never fade. A driveway soaked in vengeance, two brothers silenced before dawn, a living room reeking of decay, four bodies left beneath flickering light. A bar fight turned graveyard, one punch ending two lives. And a warrant gone wrong. A fallen officer beneath red and blue lights. Years pass, verdicts fade, but the echo of loss remains louder than the gunfire. Because in Cleveland, justice may close a case, but it never closes the wound. And this is Inside Cleveland's Darkest Black Killers Shocking True Crime Cases. Welcome back to Crime Ledger USA, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Donald Jackson Gates. It began as another spring evening in Cleveland, quiet streets, warm air, and shadows that carried unfinished vengeance. On the 14th of May 2022, 20-year-old Donald Jackson Gates, great-grandson of former Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson, walked toward his target. His victim, Chris Sean Coleman, had spent the previous day with him, unaware that friendship would turn fatal. Before dawn the next morning, gunfire shattered the calm near East 40th Street and Quincy Avenue. Coleman was struck 13 times in the torso, front and back. The motive was rooted in years of retaliatory violence that tied two families together in a chain of death. 3 years earlier, a feud began when Antonio Parra was shot outside a West Side barbershop in 2019. The getaway car was registered to Frank Q. Jackson, the grandson of the former mayor and Donald Gates' uncle. Weeks later, the car was found burned in a vacant lot, and investigators traced the arson to a man named James Grethouse. Days after that arrest, Robert Shephard, uncle of Coleman, lured Frank Q. Jackson to a meeting in the city's east side and shot him dead. Shephard was later convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. By May 2022, the feud had reignited. Coleman posted on social media defending Shephard, calling him family. Police later said those posts fueled the fire. When Coleman met Gates on the day before the shooting, friends believed they had reconciled. But Gates had already decided to strike back for his uncle's death. Investigators recovered 17 shell casings at the scene, all fired from the same handgun. Surveillance footage showed a single shooter fleeing. A witness who knew both men told detectives they were absolutely certain Gates was the gunman. Within 3 weeks, U.S. Marshals and Cleveland police arrested him without incident. Officers also recovered a firearm consistent with the casings. Ballistics linked the weapon to the killing. Gates was indicted on the 15th of June 2022 on counts of aggravated murder, felonious assault, and weapons violations. Court documents revealed he had prior involvement with local street groups, including factions tied to the No Limit 700 gang. Prosecutors argued that social media disputes and gang alliances had turned personal grudges into public killings. Facing life without parole, Gates accepted a plea deal on the 16th of August 2023. He pleaded guilty to murder, felonious assault, and having weapons under disability. The aggravated murder charge was dropped. On August 21, Judge Shirley Strickland Saffold sentenced him to life in prison with parole eligibility after 18 years. Gates was also ordered to pay funeral costs and restitution to the victim's family. Coleman's relatives described the killing as cold and calculated, questioning whether the defendant's political lineage influenced his fate. The judge rejected that claim, stating no interference occurred and justice was applied equally. 3 lessons remain. Vengeance never restores peace, social media can inflame deadly pride, and family ties offer no shield from justice. 1 gun, 2 families, and decades of silence left behind. Before we continue, if this case shakes you, press hype, stand with us, break silence, and let justice roar louder than the voices once erased. Number 2. Malik Blackwell. He moved through Cleveland streets with quiet precision, leaving behind blood, silence, and 2 men who would never see another dawn. The case of Malik Blackwell unfolded over 3 violent months in 2023, exposing the pattern of a killer driven by anger and impulse. At just 22 years old, Blackwell was already a convicted drug dealer. By the time police caught up to him, 2 men were dead, one a stranger, the other his cousin, and the city's homicide detectives were racing to connect the dots. It began on the 23rd of January 2023, when Cleveland police responded to a call on East 61st Street. Inside a small residence, they found 61-year-old Timothy Nash lying motionless, struck by multiple gunshots. Witnesses nearby reported hearing a short burst of gunfire before a car sped off into the night. Detectives collected shell casings, traced the trajectory, and recovered surveillance footage showing a figure fleeing through a nearby alley. Ballistics later matched those casings to a handgun known to be associated with Blackwell. a warrant was issued for his arrest. For weeks, investigators searched for him, combing through addresses, social media, and cell phone data. But before they could close in, another murder tore through Cleveland's east side. On the 7th of April 2023, police discovered 40-year-old Anthony Norman, Blackwell's cousin, lying in a driveway on Anson Avenue. He had been ambushed by Blackwell and an accomplice, Christopher Thompson. Multiple rounds were fired at close range, leaving Norman fatally wounded. Witnesses described seeing two men step from behind a parked vehicle, moments before shots echoed down the street. The Cleveland Division of Police Homicide Unit combined both cases under one investigation. Detectives traced cell tower data that placed Blackwell near both murder scenes at the exact times of the shootings. When reviewing his communication records, they discovered messages suggesting revenge and distrust toward his cousin. Surveillance footage also tied him to a dark sedan spotted at both locations. By early May, the search intensified. Acting on intelligence from the U.S. Marshals Northern Ohio Violent Fugitive Task Force, authorities tracked Blackwell to an apartment on Lakeshore Boulevard in Euclid. At dawn on the 4th of May 2023, officers surrounded the building and entered without resistance. Blackwell was found hiding inside. U.S. Marshal Pete Elliott called his capture a relief for a city that had suffered enough. His trial began on June 4 in the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas before Judge Maureen Clancy. Over 10 days, jurors heard from investigators, forensic experts, and witnesses who linked him to both murders. On June 14, the jury found him guilty on all counts, including 2 aggravated murders, multiple felonious assaults, and firearm violations. On June 20, Judge Clancy sentenced Blackwell to life in prison, with parole eligibility only after 68 years. Prosecutors described him as a remorseless predator whose violence shattered 2 families forever. 3 lessons remain. Violence escalates when pride meets power. Technology always leaves a trail, and justice may come late, but it comes. A life taken, a city scarred, and one man caged by his own choices. Number 3. Robert Shephard. He thought he could set a trap and walk away, but in Cleveland, every setup leaves a trail, and this one led to life in prison. The murder of Frank Q. Jackson, grandson of former Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson, stunned a city already weary of violence. On the evening of the 19th of September 2021, Jackson, just 24 years old, was lured to Sidaway Avenue under the pretense of retrieving his dirt bike from someone he trusted, Robert Shephard. What appeared to be a simple exchange became a calculated setup. As Jackson arrived in the Heritage View Homes area, an unidentified gunman approached and opened fire. Jackson was hit multiple times and died at the scene. A boy nearby was also shot and wounded in the crossfire. The killer fled with Shephard, leaving behind shell casings and chaos in a neighborhood already scarred by shootings. Detectives from the Cleveland Division of Police began piecing together what happened. Witness accounts quickly placed Shephard near the scene before and after the shooting. Surveillance footage showed movements consistent with the victim's arrival and the suspect's escape. Shephard's connection to the victim was personal. He had borrowed Jackson's dirt bike days before. Investigators concluded the meeting had been arranged as a trap. The murder appeared to be both planned and retaliatory, though the exact motive remained unclear. Weeks passed before Shephard was located. On the 27th of October 2021, the U.S. Marshals Service tracked him to East 46th Street and Central Avenue. He was taken into custody without resistance and later indicted on multiple felony counts, including aggravated murder, and felonious assault. Court records revealed Shephard's criminal history dating back to 2005, with prior convictions for drug offenses, burglary, and weapons charges. He had been released from prison just 18 months before the killing. Despite extensive investigation, the actual shooter was never identified. Prosecutors confirmed that Shephard refused to cooperate or reveal the killer's name. Under Ohio's complicity law, however, anyone who aids or abets in the commission of a homicide can be held equally responsible as the shooter. The state built its case around that principle. The trial began on the 25th of October 2022 in the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas. Prosecutors presented phone records, video surveillance, and testimony showing Shephard's role as the orchestrator of the ambush. After a week of proceedings, the jury returned a unanimous verdict on October 31, finding him guilty on all counts. 2 weeks later, Judge Dina Calabrese sentenced Robert Shephard to life in prison with parole eligibility after 33 years. The hearing was streamed to 2 additional courtrooms due to the large attendance from both families. Former Mayor Frank Jackson sat quietly as the sentence was read, marking the end of a case that had gripped Cleveland's east side for over a year. In the courtroom, grief and silence replaced anger. Three lessons remain: trust can be weaponized, silence protects no one, and vengeance only multiplies the graves. One trap, one death, and a lifetime spent behind bars. Number 4. Terrell Silver. He entered a quiet Cleveland home under the cover of night and left 4 lives extinguished, a massacre that would haunt investigators for years. In September 2019, 4 people were found dead inside a residence near East 144th Street and Kinsman Road. The victims, Christopher Monroe, Juwone Willis, Ayanna Quitman, and Jasmine Lawson, were discovered in a state of advanced decomposition. The crime was so brutal that prosecutors later called it one of the most disturbing multiple murders in the city's history. The suspect, identified as 35-year-old Terrell Silver, was known to police and had prior convictions involving firearms and violent offenses. The killings occurred sometime between September 7 and the 21st of September 2019. Detectives determined that Silver entered the residence, possibly under the pretense of visiting someone he knew. Once inside, he opened fire, shooting each victim multiple times as they lay on mattresses on the floor. The positioning of the bodies suggested they had no chance to defend themselves. Investigators would later describe the number of shell casings as consistent with a deliberate mass execution. After ensuring that no one survived, Silver fled the scene, leaving the house sealed in silence. Days passed before the crime was uncovered. On September 21, Cleveland police responded to a call from a neighbor who reported a strong odor and concerns that something was wrong. Inside, officers discovered the decomposing bodies. The heat, time, and closed environment had left the scene gruesome. Detectives documented every detail, spent casings, personal belongings, clothing, and electronic devices, carefully collecting evidence for what they suspected was a targeted killing. The investigation stretched over several years. Forensic experts from Cuyahoga County analyzed DNA samples, firearm tool marks, and ballistic patterns from the scene. A crucial breakthrough came when evidence from the house matched Silver's genetic profile and firearm signature. By the time the indictment was filed in April 2023, Silver was already incarcerated at the Trumbull Correctional Institution for unrelated robbery and weapons charges. In September 2024, after nearly 5 years of preparation, Silver stood trial in the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas. Prosecutors presented extensive forensic testimony, including analyses from ballistic specialists and crime scene technicians who reconstructed the sequence of events. Evidence tied Silver directly to the shootings through physical material, weapon tracing, and cell phone records. On the 16th of September 2024, after deliberating less than a day, the jury found him guilty of 7 counts of aggravated murder, multiple counts of felonious assault, and firearm-related offenses. 2 weeks later, Judge Ashley Kilbane sentenced Silver to 5 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, along with over 20 additional years for related charges. She called the murders nothing short of a mass shooting and emphasized that his criminal record showed a pattern of violent disregard for human life. Family members of the victims attended the hearing, describing years of trauma and the inability to find closure. 3 lessons remain. Violence often hides behind familiarity, evidence never forgets, and every act of justice begins in silence. 4 lives lost. 1 man forever confined to consequence. Number 5. Walter Triplett Jr. It started as a night of celebration and ended with one punch that changed 2 families forever. On the 30th of April 2009, Walter Triplett Jr., a Cleveland man and former bouncer, went to the Barley House bar with his twin sister Waltanya and relatives to celebrate a cousin's birthday. The atmosphere quickly shifted when a fight erupted inside. Witnesses recalled chaos spreading as dozens were pushed outside by security, turning the street into a scene of confusion and anger. In the middle of the scuffle, Walter saw 2 men approaching his sister. Believing she was being attacked, he reacted instinctively, stepping forward and throwing a single punch that would later prove fatal. The man struck was 22-year-old Michael Corrado, who fell backward, hit his head on a curb, and lost consciousness. He was rushed to the hospital and placed on a respirator, but he never regained consciousness. 18 hours later, he was pronounced dead from a severe head injury. Police arrested Walter on the scene, initially charging him with assault before upgrading the case to involuntary manslaughter. Detectives from the Cleveland Division of Police interviewed witnesses, collected surveillance footage, and reconstructed the brawl that had spilled into the street. Video confirmed Walter's punch, but conflicting testimony complicated the case. Some witnesses claimed Waltanya had been struck first, while others said Corrado had not participated in the fight at all. Retired Detective Tom Armelli later stated that evidence did not support the claim that Corrado attacked anyone, suggesting he may have been an unintended victim caught in the chaos. Walter maintained that he believed his sister was in danger and acted to protect her. In September 2009, the case went to trial. Walter was convicted of felonious assault, but the jury could not reach a verdict on involuntary manslaughter. Judge Shirley Strickland Saffold sentenced him to 18 years in prison, citing his prior convictions for robbery and violent offenses. The prosecution argued his record justified the maximum penalty, while the defense claimed the act was impulsive, not malicious. 2 years later, in 2011, the 8th Ohio District Court of Appeals overturned the conviction, citing improper jury instructions that confused self-defense and defense of another laws. The court ruled that one punch, even if fatal, could not automatically be considered deadly force. The decision became a reference point in Ohio legal precedent. A retrial began on the 11th of October 2011, under the same judge and new jury. This time, Walter was convicted of both felonious assault and involuntary manslaughter. He received a new sentence of 20 years in prison. During hearings, he alleged racial bias, noting both juries were nearly all white despite Cleveland's diverse population. The prosecution dismissed these claims, stating the evidence alone secured conviction. Now, 15 years into his term, Walter Triplett remains incarcerated at the Richland Correctional Institution in Mansfield, Ohio, with parole eligibility in 2029. 3 lessons remain. Reaction without reason brings tragedy. Justice can still divide, and one instant can destroy a lifetime. A single punch and everything changed. Number 6. David Spivey. It began with a summer evening's calm and ended with gunfire echoing through a quiet Cleveland street, leaving 2 brothers dead and a city demanding answers. On the 30th of July 2020, in Cleveland's Lee Miles neighborhood, brothers Dominique King, 26, and Delawnte King, 22, were shot and killed outside their home near the 16100 block of Walden Avenue. The attack came without warning. Witnesses later described seeing a man in a ski mask approach the driveway before multiple shots rang out. Within seconds, both brothers collapsed. The shooter fled on foot, vanishing into the neighborhood darkness. By the time police arrived, both victims were unresponsive. Detectives from the Cleveland Division of Police secured the scene, recovering shell casings and interviewing neighbors who reported hearing between 6 and 8 gunshots. Surveillance footage from nearby homes captured a masked figure moving toward the King's home minutes before the attack and fleeing moments later. Forensic teams processed the evidence, while detectives built a timeline suggesting the shooting was targeted. Within weeks, investigators identified 23-year-old David Spivey as a suspect. Police linked him to the killings through witness accounts and communications evidence connecting him to one of the victims before the shooting. A warrant for his arrest was issued in September 2021, but by then, Spivey had already fled Cleveland. The investigation expanded across state lines, coordinated by the Northern Ohio Violent Fugitive Task Force. For more than 2 years, Spivey remained on the run. Detectives followed a trail of false leads through Ohio and Michigan before intelligence pointed them toward Houston, Texas. In October 2022, the Gulf Coast Violent Offenders and Fugitive Task Force located Spivey hiding at an apartment complex in Houston. He was taken into custody without incident and extradited to Ohio to face multiple charges, including aggravated murder, and felonious assault. Despite the arrest, investigators determined a second suspect was involved in the shooting. The alleged accomplice has never been publicly identified and remains at large. Authorities continue to appeal to the public for information leading to that individual's capture. Spivey's first trial began in November 2023 before Judge John O'Donnell. After weeks of testimony from witnesses and forensic experts, the jury became deadlocked, resulting in a mistrial. Prosecutors swiftly announced their intent to retry the case, confident in the strength of their evidence. The second trial began on the 18th of February 2025. This time, jurors heard detailed forensic testimony connecting Spivey to the recovered casings and communications data, placing him near the scene at the time of the murders. On the 26th of February 2025, the jury convicted David Spivey of 4 counts of murder and 4 counts of felonious assault. He was acquitted of aggravated murder but found guilty on all other charges. On the 12th of March 2025, Judge O'Donnell sentenced Spivey to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 21 years. 3 lessons remain. Time may delay justice, silence never hides truth, and every witness matters. 2 brothers gone, 1 man captured, and 1 still missing. Number 7. Jemerious Davis and Juwone Deaver. Fireworks lit the Cleveland sky that July evening. But within minutes, the celebration turned into chaos, ending in the sound of gunfire and the loss of an innocent life. On the 4th of July 2024, a neighborhood near West 125th Street and Triscuit Road became the scene of a tragedy that shocked the city. Family and friends had gathered for a 4th of July cookout when a car carrying 4 people approached the home. Among those standing outside were brothers Jemerious Davis, 24, and Juwone Deaver, 29. Both were armed. Witnesses later testified that as the vehicle pulled up, the 2 men opened fire using a .45 caliber handgun and an AK-style rifle. Their bullets tore through the air, striking the car and fatally wounding Gracie Griffin, who was among those celebrating. Investigators later determined that the vehicle's occupants were friends of the shooters, and that no one inside had fired a weapon. Evidence collected from the scene showed all shots had come from the residence outward. Officers recovered multiple shell casings, bullet fragments, and weapons consistent with the ballistics reports. Despite initial claims that Davis and Deaver fired out of fear or in defense, detectives from the Cleveland Division of Police concluded that there was no threat toward the home. The investigation quickly widened. Detectives interviewed dozens of witnesses, including partygoers and neighbors. Surveillance video supported the conclusion that the gunfire originated from the driveway area. Within weeks, prosecutors issued indictments for 4 individuals connected to the case: Davis, Deaver, Katie McKnight, and Ed Juwone Williams. The latter 2 were charged with obstructing justice for providing false statements during the investigation. U.S. Marshals located and arrested Deaver and McKnight on the 30th of July 2024. Davis, who had fled the area, was taken into custody on August 8 after a week-long search coordinated by the Northern Ohio Violent Fugitive Task Force. As evidence mounted, the Cuyahoga County Grand Jury charged Davis and Deaver with murder, felonious assault, and multiple firearm offenses. Prosecutors emphasized the recklessness of their actions, describing how bullets struck nearby houses and risked multiple lives across the densely populated block. The case went to trial in June 2025 before Judge Carl Mazzone. After 8 days of testimony from detectives, ballistics experts, and eyewitnesses, a jury convicted both defendants on all major counts, including 1 count of murder and 4 counts of felonious assault. The prosecution argued that the fatal shot to Gracie Griffin's head was the direct result of their unjustified gunfire. On the 21st of July 2025, Judge Mazzone sentenced Jemerious Davis and Juwone Deaver to 25 years to life in prison. He imposed consecutive terms, citing the extreme danger posed to the community and the number of victims involved. The men will be eligible for parole after serving 25 years. The courtroom remained silent as Gracie's grandmother described her as the heartbeat of our family, while prosecutors called the verdict a warning against senseless gun violence. 3 lessons endure. Fear never justifies recklessness. Firearms demand accountability, and every stray bullet carries consequence. A holiday of joy became a lifetime of grief. Number 8. Delawnte Hardy. A quiet Cleveland neighborhood woke to the sound of sirens that marked one of the city's darkest summer mornings in recent memory. On the 28th of June 2024, 24-year-old Delawnte Hardy was staying with his grandmother, 63-year-old Beatrice Porter, in Garfield Heights, Ohio. Investigators allege that Hardy, who had a documented history of mental illness, stole his grandmother's handgun and fatally shot her in the back of the head before fleeing the scene on his grandfather's bicycle. When a family member found Porter unresponsive hours later, police launched a citywide search. She succumbed to her injuries on the 4th of July 2024. Just hours before her death, tragedy struck again. Around 1 a.m. that morning, Cleveland police officers arrived at a home near East 80th Street and Wade Park Avenue after receiving a tip that Hardy was hiding there. Officer Jamison Ritter, 27, was among the officers attempting to serve the warrant for Hardy's arrest. Using a loudspeaker, Ritter repeatedly instructed Hardy to exit the home with his hands visible. Instead, Hardy fled through the back door carrying the stolen gun and 2 swords. As officers pursued, Hardy allegedly fired multiple shots. 1 struck Officer Ritter, fatally wounding him. 2 additional shots narrowly missed other officers as Hardy attempted to escape on a bicycle. He was subdued and arrested at the scene. Ritter was rushed to university hospitals, where he was pronounced dead. The incident drew immediate grief from the department and the wider community, as tributes poured in for the young officer who had served with distinction. While in custody at the Cuyahoga County Jail on the 20th of July 2024, Hardy attempted to escape, attacking corrections officers during a routine shower release. He was subdued with pepper spray, and the event was documented as further evidence of his violent instability. In the months that followed, Hardy was indicted on multiple charges, including 3 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of attempted aggravated murder, 1 count of murder, and 4 counts of felonious assault. However, his case quickly stalled. In October 2024, He was declared incompetent to stand trial and transferred to Central Ohio Behavioral Health Care in Columbus for psychiatric restoration. Court records confirmed he was diagnosed with schizophrenia but refused to take his prescribed medications for 5 months, halting his treatment progress. Because of that refusal, Judge Ashley Kilbane extended Hardy's competency restoration period by 7 months, an unusual move under Ohio law, which currently limits such treatment to 1 year. In March 2025, after the court approved involuntary treatment, Hardy began receiving psychotropic medications under strict monitoring. Reports later revealed he had also been taken to an emergency room after allegedly ingesting drug-laced mail, prompting additional court orders for detailed medication compliance records. As of December 2025, Hardy remains under court-ordered treatment at Central Ohio Behavioral Health Care. His competency deadline is set for the 20th of February 2026. 3 lessons emerge. Mental illness can't excuse unchecked violence. Justice delayed still wounds deeply, and every safeguard must be enforced. A city mourns 2 lives and waits for justice. Each name echoes through the streets, each act reminding us that evil doesn't need a mask, it hides in plain sight. But there are still untold cases, deeper corners of this city where justice hasn't yet knocked. The question is, how many more stories remain buried beneath the silence? If you want to uncover them first, make sure to subscribe to Crime Ledger USA and hit that notification bell, so you'll be the first to witness the next shocking chapter when it drops.